Chapter 4401. Can we eat the meat inside? Let's just eat the meat inside. Moo-chan pointed at the two charred chickens. However, looked at it and used a dagger to cut off the charred outside, then cut the meat inside for them to eat. Try it. Chen took it and handed it to you first, then took a piece and ate it himself. Aha, it's delicious. You said happily and ate in small bites. She held it in one hand and blew on it with her mouth. Aha, it's delicious. Moo-chan nodded. Hao cut off a piece and ate it. However, as soon as it entered his mouth, he tasted the charred taste and the dry taste of the meat. It was very hard, and there was no seasoning, so there was nothing but the charred taste. It was very difficult to eat. He looked at Moo-chan and Moo-yu eating with relish and his heart tightened. His eyes couldn't help but redden. In order not to let them find out, he lowered his head and bit the charred meat in his mouth while swallowing back his tears. Even if his memory was not fully awakened, he knew that they were of noble birth and had a good life. But now, he let his brother and sister starve to the point that they could only eat this charred chicken. Don't eat it. There are still pastries and a small piece of jerky in the space. Eat that. He reached out and took the meat in their hands and threw it into the extinguished fire. The two little guys looked at him and saw that his eyes were slightly red. They couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Big brother, what's wrong?" "Eat this. This can't be eaten. Throw it away and don't want it." He threw away the two burnt chickens and stuffed the pastries wrapped in paper into their arms, along with a small piece of jerky. Looking at the things in their bosom, the two little fellows hesitated for a bit, then Yu-er softly said with her immature voice, "But, we can't go out, are we going to wait until we are very very hungry to eat these?" "It's okay. Eat it first. We'll think of a way after eating," he said and let them eat. Seeing this, the two little guys looked at each other. So, Chen divided the small piece of jerky into 3 pieces and handed one piece to Hao. "Big brother, you eat too." As he spoke, he took some pastries for him. "I don't eat jerky, I only eat few pieces of pastries," Hao said, then handed over the jerky to You eat. You doesn't want to eat, big brother eat. You shook her little head and pushed back. "Big brother, you eat. Let's share it." Chen looked at him and said. Hao shook his head and said, "This piece of jerky isn't ordinary jerky. It's spirit beast meat. Eating it will be good for your body." He divided his piece of jerky into 2 portions and handed it to the two of them. "Eat this and see if you can stimulate the spiritual power in your body. I'll give you some pills later." The two little guys looked at each other. Seeing that he didn't want to eat, they took the jerky and asked, "Big brother, will we be able to go back to find father and mother after we have spiritual power?" Hearing them mention father and mother, a picture flashed through Hao's mind. He came back to his senses and said, "You and I are the same. Both of you have contract beasts. But your spiritual power is sealed. So contract beasts can't come out. If you can restore your spiritual power and let contract beasts come out, perhaps we can think of a way to go back earlier. Then can Big Brother's contract beasts come out?" You curiously asked. Chapter 4402. Seeing their faces turn gloomy, he hurriedly comforted them. "But mother gave me a lot of medicinal pills. Maybe some of them can come in handy." As he spoke, he hurriedly took out some small bottles from his space and rummaged through them. When the two little guys saw so many beautiful little bottles, they also went forward to take a look. Moo-chan picked up one and saw the words "Hemostasis powder" written on the bottle. He picked up another one and found that these beautiful little bottles were printed with 2 words below them. "Ghost Doctor." Mu-Chen softly read it out. He recognized these two words, and when he said them, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Big brother, the words Ghost Doctor are printed on the bottom of this bottle. Who is this Ghost Doctor? Is it Mother? Mu-Chen asked. Something seemed to be faintly floating in his mind, but when he thought about it carefully, his head started to hurt again. Ouch! He put down the bottle and hugged his head with both hands. Little brother. Howler hurriedly went forward and hugged him. Don't think about it. You can't break the seal now. Don't think about it. Mu-Chen gradually calmed down. A layer of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead as he looked at the bottle. But I feel that the Ghost Doctor on this bottle and these medicines are related to Mother. These medicines were refined by Mother and given to me by her. The Ghost Doctor should be referring to her. Howler stared at the bottle and said, It's just that, I don't know where we are now, but I know that our home is in the Phoenix Dynasty. The moment Mu-Chen said the Ghost Doctor, that red figure once again appeared in his mind. Scenes flashed by, one name after another, but only their names were missing. Big brother, then when are we leaving here? Let's go out and find our way. We'll find our way home and go home by ourselves, okay? Yu-Er looked at him with a pair of beautiful big eyes, her little face filled with excitement. Howler nodded and replied, Okay, but we have to wait until I cultivate. If we go out now, I'm afraid that I won't be able to protect you if you encounter danger. Hearing his words, the two of them didn't say anything else. Instead, they helped him find what medicine he could take. Can this chi-gathering pill be taken? What is this for? And what is it for? Can this big brother eat it? The two little fellows asked while holding the pills. Even though they recognized the words, they didn't know what they were for. Meanwhile, in the palace of the Xianyuan Empire, Xianyuan Mose watched as Fengjiu flipped through books all day, trying to find a way to break the ancient blood array. She had lost a lot of weight. He sighed softly, walked up to her, and took the book from her hands. Don't look anymore. You haven't rested for a few days. You can't go on like this. Fengjiu paused, then said, 3 children, I don't know where they are suffering, how can I not worry? How can we not think of a way to break it? Actually, I had a premonition that this day would come. Chapter 4403. Fengjiu was silent and didn't say anything. The two children's faded stars were lit up because she helped them form contracts with the ancient mythical beasts, allowing them to share their lives with the ancient mythical beasts. However, she also knew that even though she had caught contract beasts for the two children, things weren't over yet. Just like her, even though she had formed a contract with the ancient mythical beast, the Fire Phoenix, her journey was also full of trials and tribulations. In order for them to grow, they had to go through those dangers and difficulties. Even though they wanted to protect the two children by their side and block the dangers and tribulations for them, what was to come would come in the end. However, she didn't expect this day to come so early. Xianyuan Mose held her hand and said, Don't worry too much. We should be glad that they have contracted beasts. Moreover, Howler disappeared with them. Maybe the 3 children are together. Will they be together? Fengjiu looked at him with some uncertainty. He held her hand tightly and said, Don't worry. They have a lot of good fortune and will definitely turn misfortune into blessing. Moreover, these 2 days, I've been thinking that the Demon Lord's blood curse ancient array broke the bloodline bond between the children and us. Therefore, I think that without our blood in Howler's body, the power of the blood curse ancient array will be greatly weakened. Seeing her tense expression and looking at him, he said, However, this is only my guess. Right now, we don't know which world they are in. Therefore, I think that instead of waiting here, we should go out and look for them. Even if the 3,000 worlds are in different worlds, as long as we have the heart, we will definitely find them one day. Okay. Let's go out and look for them. We'll look for them one by one. She stood up and said, I'll pack up and prepare now. With that, she turned and walked into the room. Xianyuanmo's didn't stop her. He only looked at her figure entering the room and then withdrew his gaze. Half of what he said was to comfort her, and the other half was his guess. Where were the 3 children now? None of them knew. These days, they had tried many methods, but to no avail. There was no response from the communication jades that he sent to the 3 kids. He hadn't heard from them in the past few days, but Fengjiu was getting thinner day by day. He knew that he couldn't let it go on like this. Instead of letting her stay here and wait, flipping through books all day long, it would be better to take her everywhere to search. At least this way, she would have a trace of hope and expectation every day. My lord. Du Fan walked in and bowed to him. You came at the right time. I have something to tell you. As Xianyuanmo spoke, he looked at him and said, It's already been a few days since the 3 children's matter. The Feng Manor still doesn't know about it. Go back personally and tell them about it. As for the Black Tortoise Sovereign, Gio and I will go there personally. Also, Gio and I plan on going out to look for the children. There's no need for you to follow. Hearing this, Du Fan was slightly startled. My lord, do you only plan to leave with my master? Why don't you bring 1 or 2 people with you? Chapter 4404. Okay, I know. Seeing that he had made up his mind, Du Fan didn't say anything more and retreated after giving a salute. On the other side, the 3 children were still in that deep mountain. They had already stayed here for several days and gradually got used to the environment here. It was worth mentioning that in these few days, Hao had been practicing his barbecue skill. Although he couldn't make the barbecue taste like the barbecue his mother made in his memory, but compared to the first time, he had already improved a lot. They also didn't need to go hunting because that Wolf King would bring them prey. Because he was worried that he couldn't protect the 2 little ones, Hao also taught Qin and Yu to practice these few days in addition to his own practice. However, their spiritual power was unable to recover, so he could only teach them some martial skills. Big brother, I seem to have learned this before, I know it. Shen looked at the set of fish techniques he was making and felt very familiar. Immediately, he followed suit and made every punch just right. Daddy should have taught you before, this fish technique was taught to me by Daddy. Hao said with a smile on his little face. Yu seems to know it too. Yu said with her little head tilted and also followed suit. Well, you 2 practice by yourselves. I'll go over there and practice under the tree. You 2 don't go too far. If there's anything, just call me. Hao told them to practice by themselves. He went over to the tree, sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to practice. The 2 little guys also practiced seriously because these days their big brother told them that their daddy and mommy weren't by their side. If they encountered bad people, they had to think of a way to protect themselves. Therefore, they had to practice well and couldn't be lazy. In the deep mountain forest, the climate was relatively humid. Although there was sunshine, but the air was always a bit more damp. The 2 children practiced for the whole morning. Their clothes were wet with sweat and felt very uncomfortable. Because they didn't wash, it was more like something was biting their body. Big brother, Yu is itchy here. Yu slightly twisted her little body and wanted to scratch her back, but she couldn't. Here. Shen helped her scratch the itch and asked. No, a little more to the left, a little more. Yes, it's right there. The little one's beautiful eyes curved into crescents as he smiled. So comfortable, big brother, grab again, grab again. Yu giggled. Seeing this, Chen said, I'll take you to wash up. It won't itch anymore after I wash it. Bathe? But the water there is very small, so you can't bathe there. Yu said while looking at her brother. Then wipe it, or call Big Brother. Let's find a bigger water source. We haven't bathed for a few days. Chapter 4405. Okay, let's go look. After we find it, we'll take a bath and leave this place. He stood up and looked around. Wolf King, come here. At the same time, he waved his hand. When the Wolf King heard his voice, it crawled up from the grass. Seeing him waving at it, it paused for a moment before carefully walking over and howling in a low voice. Lie down. How patted its rear, and the Wolf King lay down. Come, sit on its back. We'll ride it to look for it. As How spoke, he carried Chin to the front and then carried Yu to sit on it. He sat at the back. Little brother, hold on to its fur and don't fall. You have to clamp its body with your legs. How taught him from behind. Okay. Muchin responded and lay down slightly. His hands tightly gripped the Wolf King's fur and his legs clamped tightly on its body. In response, the Wolf King looked back at them and did not move. It just waited for them to sit properly. Yu carried Chin in front and How at the back stretched out his hands to protect them so that they would not fall in the process of running. Go to the front. How clamped its waist like riding a horse and shouted. The Wolf King rushed out like the wind, followed by 7 or 8 wolves. Ha 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 ha. So fun, so fun. Yu giggled happily, not knowing fear at all. Chin-er's eyes also sparkled as he looked ahead. The Wolf King ran very fast and the wind in front of them was also strong. They only felt very happy as they watched the trees around them quickly pass by. Fortunately, they were deep in the forest and there were very few people around. Otherwise, ordinary people would probably be scared half to death if they saw 3 children riding wolves in the forest. After walking around the forest for a while, they found a large mountain spring. Thus, the 3 children prepared to wash their dirty bodies here. Big brother, what if you doesn't have clean clothes to wear after bathing? The little one blinked and looked at him. She realized that her big brother had a solution for everything. It's okay. You go down and wash first. After washing, wear my clothes. I'll help you wash your clothes and then dry them. How said. Seeing that Chin couldn't untie his belt, he went forward and said, let me do it. When Muchin saw that the belt that he had been trying to untie for a long time was untied, he thanked him happily. Thank you, big brother. Hurry up and wash up, but you can't wash for too long. The spring water is too cold. You'll get sick if you wash for too long. How looked at the sun above. Fortunately, it was noon and the temperature was warmer. Okay. The 2 little guys responded. Muchin took off his clothes first and shyly covered the little bird between his legs as he got into the water. Yu pulled her knotted hair and shouted, Big brother, my hair is knotted. How was in the process of putting away Chin-er's clothes to one side. After hearing Yu-er's words, he saw that she had taken off her outer garment and was standing there pulling her hair while wearing only a small inner garment, so he said, Big brother will help you wash your hair first. Come here. Yu-er obediently walked over, and was carried by him. Her body was laid flat on his lap, and her head was slightly lowered, dipping into the spring water. Wash your face first. It will be a little cold. How said and carefully wiped her little face with a small handkerchief. After letting her adapt to the spring water, he helped her wash her hair. Chapter 4406. After washing the two little guys' clothes, he used his spiritual power in his palm to help them dry their clothes. Watching him dry their clothes, the two little guys couldn't help but widen their eyes. Amazing! Hearing this, Howler revealed a smile. Only a little of my strength has recovered. If I fully recover, I will be even more powerful. As he spoke, he helped them put on the dry clothes. However, there was another problem. Shen-er's hair was easy to tie up, but he didn't know how to tie up Yu-er's hair. Shen-er looked at his elder brother who had been tying Yu-er's hair for a long time but still couldn't tie it up properly. Finally, when he saw him tie Yu-er's hair into two crooked little horns, he couldn't help but exhale softly. Although it was a little strange, at least it was tied up properly. Hee, Yu hasn't tied up the little horns before. Brother, does it look good? The little one excitedly touched the two little horns on her head and looked at her brother. Shen-er glanced at it and nodded. It looks good. It was just a little strange. Come, eat another pill. Howler took out another pill for them and stuffed it into their mouths. Big brother, it's useless for us to eat this every day. Yu said, but still swallowed the pill. Whether it's useful or not, it's better to eat it. What if you can condense spiritual power in your body? After feeding them the pill, Howler filled some water and was about to take them away when he saw Mu-chin sitting there holding his stomach with a strange expression. He was shocked and hurried forward. Little brother. What's wrong? Is your stomach uncomfortable? Mu-chin held his stomach and felt a warm aura surging inside, but it didn't seem to be from his stomach, but it felt inexplicably familiar. Big brother, I seem to have sensed spiritual power. As he spoke, the strange expression on his delicate little face gradually dissipated, leaving only calmness. Really? Howler was delighted and hurriedly said, let me see. He reached out to feel his pulse and released his spiritual power. Sure enough, he felt a wisp of spiritual power flowing in his body. Great! Great! Howler's little face was full of excitement. My stomach is also warm, as if something is walking around inside. Yu said with a pair of big eyes. She felt a little strange because this aura felt familiar to her. Quick! Eat another pill. Howler immediately took out a chi-gathering pill from his space and gave one to each of them. None of the three little fellows had thought that their spiritual energy would recover so quickly. However, it was their bodies that were regenerating their spiritual energy, not the seal being broken. If there was a reason, it could only be attributed to the two children's innate spiritual bodies and the effects of the energy-gathering pill. Originally, they planned to find a way to leave today, but because Mu-chin and Mu-yu sensed spiritual energy again, their journey was delayed again. Today, they didn't leave. Instead, under Howler's guidance, they repracticed the most basic cultivation techniques. Chapter 4407. The Wolf King looked at him and walked forward. With a low howl, it lay down in front of him. Howler patted the Wolf King's head and said, "Thank you for these days. This pill is for you." He stuffed the pill into the Wolf King's mouth. It wasn't a rare medicinal pill, but it was a medicinal pill refined by his mother. It could be considered as a reward for the Wolf King protecting them and hunting for prey for them these past few days. Awoo! The Wolf King swallowed the pill and excitedly howled. It rubbed its head against his palm. Howler withdrew his hand and led the two little guys along the mountain path. The Wolf King watched from behind until they could no longer be seen. It howled 3 times and leaped back into the mountains. The 3 children walked along the mountain path until noon. The scorching sun above their heads made them sweat from time to time. Thus, the 3 of them rested under a tree by the roadside. "Little sister, drink some water." How took out some water from his space and handed it to her. After you finished drinking, she handed it back to him. Big brother, drink too. Little brother, drink some water. Drink more. How passed the water to him. After he drank it, he drank some himself and took out some dried meat for them to eat. After resting, the three of them continued walking. However, after walking for a while, How noticed that you was walking with a slight limp. He stopped and asked, "Little sister, what's wrong with your foot?" You hesitated for a moment before whispering, "My foot hurts." "Where does it hurt?" "Let me take a look." How said and led her to the side of the road to sit down. He helped her take off her boots and socks. His little face tightened. He saw that there were 3 or 4 bloody blisters on her white and tender feet. Each blister was the size of a finger. Her toes were also red, but she did not make a sound. He couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He patted her head and said, "You, be good. Big brother will help you remove the blisters. After applying some medicine, it won't hurt anymore." Mu-chin, who was at the side, pursed his little mouth tightly, and his eyes were filled with nervousness and worry. When he saw his big brother taking out something to help you to break the blood blisters, he walked forward and hugged Yu's little head to his bosom, while saying, "It won't hurt, if you don't look, it won't hurt." Yu was lying in Mu-chen's embrace, her small hands clutching his clothes. Her legs were propped on her big brother's thighs. She couldn't see, but she felt a burst of pain and couldn't help but cry out. "It'll be fine after a while." How used clean water to wash her. After cleaning her, he applied the medicine and carefully tied her up with a small piece of cloth to prevent her skin from being scratched. "All right," How said. "Don't wear boots first. Big brother will carry you." "Aw." Yu blinked her eyes, and with an adorable expression on her delicate little face, she blankly said, "But Yu is very heavy." How saw her little appearance and couldn't help but find it funny. He said, "It's not heavy. Big brother can carry you. Come." He turned his back and squatted down with his hands behind his back. He said to Mu-chin, "Little brother, take my boots. Don't lose them." Mu-chin responded and helped Yu onto his back. Then, he took the boots and walked beside them. Chapter 4408. The little one smiled and squinted his eyes, obediently lying on his back. Along the way, he happily chatted with the two of them. After walking for a long time, he asked, "Big brother, are you tired? Yu can come down and walk by herself." "Not tired, big brother can carry me." How said and shook his head. "Then Yu will help big brother wipe his sweat." She saw sweat on his forehead and used her sleeve to help him wipe it. Feeling the little one's clumsy little hand randomly wiping his forehead, How's eyes flashed with a touch of warmth. "If you are hungry or thirsty, tell big brother." "Yes, yes." The two nodded in response. They walked and rested all the way. When the sky gradually darkened, they saw a small village. "There is a small village in front." Yu excitedly pointed to the front and said. How and Chen also showed a smile. After walking for a whole day, they had been walking along the mountain road until now when they saw people. "Let's go take a look and inquire about where this place is." How said and carried Yu and took Chen to turn a corner and walked along the mountain road to the small village. At this time, it was evening. In this remote mountain village, more than 10 families were cooking. Smoke rose from the chimneys and the fragrance of the food also spread. Coming to the village, smelling the fragrance of the food from each family, The eyes of the three children who had been eating barbecued meat for several days could not help but brighten. It smells so good. Yor sniffed with her small nose and smelled the fragrance of the food with a greedy face. Big brother, let little sister sit here for a while. Muchin pointed to a stone next to him and said. Okay. Hao agreed and put her down. He said to the two children, you two wait for me here, I will go ahead and ask. After telling them not to run around, he went to the front of the house. Where did the children come from? A woman in her 30s came out and splashed the water in her hand in front of the door. She saw the three children at the entrance of the village. This place was remote and usually very few people came here. The more than 10 families in the village were familiar with each other, and at this time, hearing the woman's words, the people in the next house stretched out half of their body to look. There are really children. Where did they come from? Why don't I see my lord? Another woman in her 40s said. She walked out and looked around. Seeing that there were no adults, only the three children, she couldn't help but feel strange. Hao didn't have much contact with people in the past. Coupled with his cold personality, he looked indifferent at such a young age. However, he was handsome and had an outstanding temperament. At a glance, one could tell that he wasn't a child from an ordinary family. Among the villagers who gradually gathered around, there were women, men, and old people. Finally, an old man with a wooden walking stick in his hand stroked his beard and looked at Hao. He asked, child, where are you from? Where is my lord? Hao's gaze swept across the crowd and finally landed on the old man. He cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. Grandpa, my younger brother and sister were separated from our family. Can you let us rest here for the night? Separated. Chapter 4409. The old man turned around and looked at the woman next to him. Old woman, don't we still have an empty house? Tidy it up and let the three children rest. Okay. The old woman in her 50s or 60s responded with a smile. Her face was full of kindness. You can come to my house to rest. I am the village chief of this village. My house is behind there. The old man pointed to the house behind and said with a smile. I have 2 grandsons at home who are about the same age as you. Thank you, Grandpa Village Chief. Hao thanked him. As soon as his voice fell, 2 young voices came from the side. Thank you, Grandpa Village Chief. Muchin helped Muyu over. He had already put on his boots, but he still walked with a limp. He, good, let's go. Come to my house. It just so happens that my family is cooking. Let's eat together. He looked at the 3 children with pity in his heart. Children of this age were about the same age as his grandsons, but they were wandering outside. It was really pitiful. The people of the remote mountain village were also simple. When they saw the 3 children wandering outside, they also felt pity for them. When they saw that the 3 children were so delicate and their behavior was so different from ordinary children, they were even more envious. They really didn't know what kind of people their parents were. They actually gave birth to such well-behaved and sensible children. Looking at the 3 children and then comparing them with their own brats, the parents could only shake their heads helplessly and bitterly. Originally, they felt that their children were well-behaved and sensible, but compared with others, they really couldn't be compared. Eating at the old village chief's house, watching the 3 children eat a big bowl of rice and drink a bowl of soup, the old village chief and his wife looked at each other and secretly thought that these 3 children were probably starving. Eat slowly. If it's not enough, there's still more. The old village chief said and gave them some vegetables and meat. Thank you, Grandpa Village Chief. You is full. Yu-er finished eating the rice and vegetables in the bowl. Touching her full stomach, she smiled and narrowed her beautiful eyes. He, it's good that you're full. You can't eat too much at night, otherwise it won't be easy to digest. The old village chief smiled as he looked at the cute little girl. He couldn't help but pat her head and said kindly, "In a while, you two go take a bath and then go to sleep. Have a good rest." N. Yu-er answered with a beaming smile. "You've just eaten, so don't take a bath. You can go later. The water is already boiling at the back. You can take a bath in a while," the old woman said as she brought over a small stool for them to sit and rest. "Where is your home?" "This village is still far from the town. It will take you a long time to reach the town by yourself," the old village chief said, looking at the three of them. Hearing what was said, Chen-er and Yu-er both didn't speak, but instead looked at their eldest brother at the same time. Heartwarming thought for a moment and said, "Grandpa Village Chief, have you heard of the Phoenix Dynasty?" Hearing this, Village Chief stroked his beard and frowned in contemplation. "Phoenix Dynasty?" He shook his head. "I've never heard of it. What kind of place is that? Is it very far from Jian, a nation?" Hearing Jian, a nation that he had never heard of before, Heartwarming's eyes flashed. He was silent for a moment and asked again, then, "Grandpa Village Chief, have you heard of the Ghost Doctor?" Chapter 44:10. The old village chief looked at the three of them and said, "Why are you asking this? If you want to find someone or a place, wait until you return home and let your parents find it." Heartwarming's eyes flashed and said, "I heard my mother say that there are immortals who cultivate in the Phoenix Dynasty. Moreover, the Ghost Doctor is a very powerful person, so I'm very curious." "Immortals? Ha 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 ha." The old man laughed while stroking his beard. He shook his head and looked at the three of them, saying, "You are children. How can there be immortals who cultivate in this world? Those are all legends." The three children were stunned. Their hearts tightened and they faintly felt uneasy. Yu said, "But there really are immortals. My mother said so." She insisted that there were immortals and looked at him nervously with her beautiful eyes. "Ha ha ha, your mother must have coaxed you. Immortals, that's a legend. I've lived for more than half of my life and went to many places when I was young, but I've never heard of the existence of immortals. Those are all stories, legends, lies." The old village chief smiled and waved his hand. "Grandpa Village Chief means that there are no immortals in Jian and country." Heartwarming looked at him and secretly clenched his little hands. "Ha ha ha, that's natural. If there are immortals, then there won't be birth, old age, illness, and death." The village chief smiled and said, "You children don't understand. If there are immortals in this world, no one wants to die. Everyone wants to become an immortal. Tell me, is that still the way of the world?" He stroked his beard and smiled, saying, "I've lived to this age." "What immortals? They've never appeared. I've only heard those people make up some nonsense and say that it's some legend passed down. Actually, how can there be immortals in this world? There aren't any." The three children didn't say anything. They just looked at each other and felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. There were actually no immortal cultivators in this place. Would their parents be able to find them? How were they going to get back? All right. You guys, quickly go take a bath and have a good rest. Stay here for a few days first. In a few days, the village will transport some firewood to the town to sell. At that time, you can take the donkey cart with you. That way, you don't have to walk." The old village chief smiled and stood up. Hearing the three children talk about immortals, he only felt that it was funny. If there were immortals in this world, then everyone would want to become an immortal. However, immortals were only legends. No one had ever seen one. As soon as the old village chief left, 2 7- or 8-year-old boys came to their side and looked at them curiously. Are there really immortals? We've never heard Grandpa talk about immortals. What do immortals look like? Have you seen him before? Howard and the other two looked at each other, stood up, and said, "We're going to bathe and sleep." At night, 3 children were lying on a big bed, but all 3 of them were unable to sleep. They opened their eyes and looked at the pitch-black top of the bed. Howard tossed and turned, and couldn't help but sit up, then softly said in a soft voice, Big brother, why did Grandpa Village Head say that there is no immortal? Can we still go back to find father and mother? Can we still go home?" Muchin also sat up and said, "There is, but they have never seen it." Chapter 44:11. Because Howard's foot blisters had not yet healed, and the village head said that they would have a donkey cart to go to town in a few days, and the rest stayed here for a few more days. The folk customs in the village were simple. Seeing that the 3 children were handsome and delicate, they treated them well. Whoever had something to eat at home would give them some. On this day, the 2 grandsons of the village head came to the door of Howard's room with a few eggs. "Sister Howard, we brought you some food." Shin came out to open the door and his gaze fell on the eggs in their hands. Howard poked her head out from behind. When she saw the 2 of them, she smiled and squinted her eyes. She was very likable. "Brother Dawa, brother Erwa. Here, these are the eggs that Grandma just cooked. We brought some for you." The 2 children handed the eggs in their hands to them and asked, "Do you want to go out and play with us?" Muchin and Howard took the eggs, thanked them, and shook their heads. "No." Hearing this, the 2 children were a little strange and said, "You don't go out every day and just stay in the room like this. Children should go out and play more often." No, you and brother have to memorize. We don't want to play." The little one smiled and squinted his eyes. "Brother Dawa, brother Erwa, go and play. We're going in." "Okay then." Seeing that they were not going out to play, the 2 children did not say anything more and left after giving them the eggs. Seeing them leave, Muchin and Muyu looked at each other, closed the door, and returned to their room. After putting the eggs aside, they sat cross-legged on the bed and cultivated like their brother. Their brother said that even if there were no immortals here, they had to cultivate every day and improve their strength to protect themselves. Tomorrow, the people in the village would go to town. At that time, they would also follow and go outside to find the way home. Thinking of what their brother said to them, maybe if their spiritual aura was strong enough, they would be able to break the seal in their bodies one day. They did not dare to be lazy and obediently followed to cultivate. Outside, the village head and his wife were sitting in front of the door, picking vegetables and chatting. "Old man, look at the 3 children, they don't go out of the room. What do you think they are doing inside? They are so young, how can they stay in the room?" The village head looked back at the backyard while smoking a hookah and said, "These 3 children are not from an ordinary family. They are so obedient and sensible that it makes one's heart ache." "That's right. Tell me, how could such sensible children be separated from their families? Moreover, it's in a remote place like ours. It sounds weird." "Ha ha ha." The old village head chuckled and said, "Who knows what is going on? But these days, I've been thinking. The 3 of them are so young. If they go out, they will easily encounter danger." The old woman was worried. Chapter 44:12. Their parents are really too much. Their children are wandering outside, why didn't they send someone to look for them? Sigh, they're really open-minded. The old woman picked up the vegetables she had chosen and said, I'm going to cook. There's soup inside. It's just right to nourish the children's bodies. The next day, before dawn, several men were busy at the village gate, folding bundles of firewood and putting them on the donkey cart. How, and the other two watched from the side. A man next to them smiled and said, Village chief, why do you want to go to the town? If you want to buy anything, just let us know. We can buy it back. You don't have to run back and forth like this. Sigh, it's because my legs and feet have been acting up these few days. I need to go to the town to have a look. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep at night because of the soreness. The old village chief said and said to the old woman beside him, Okay, go back. We can make it back by night. Be careful on the road. Go early and come back early. The old woman said and stuffed the pancakes she had made into How's hands for them to eat on the road. Come, sit up here. The man carried onto the donkey cart. When he was about to carry Chen said, I can do it myself. With that, he climbed up by himself. How saw him climb up and also sat up. The old village chief and the man driving the donkey cart sat in front. Sit down, we're setting off. The man shouted and threw the target in his hand. He drove the donkey cart along the mountain path. After watching the donkey cart leave, the old woman returned to the house. The old woman couldn't sleep anymore, so she went to tidy up the house where the three children had stayed for a few days. However, she didn't expect to see a shiny gold coin on the table. This is. The old woman was startled. She picked it up and looked carefully. She couldn't help but be surprised. How could there be a gold coin? This gold coin was equivalent to 100 silver coins. For ordinary people like them, this was a lot of money. On the way, How sat cross-legged in the back and cultivated. The old village chief and the man sitting in front knew that they were sitting in the back and didn't worry about anything else. They just chatted with them from time to time. At the back, Yu and Mu Chen were eating pancakes when they heard the hushed voice coming from the front. Village chief, I heard from them that the road has not been peaceful these days. A few passers-by even died a while ago. Bandits again. Logically speaking, this area is a remote and desolate place, so there shouldn't be any bandits. I heard that he's a murderer who fled here to seek refuge. The terrain here is complicated, so it's not easy for the authorities to catch him. Look, he's now a scourge to the common people. The brother and sister ate the biscuits as they spoke in low voices. After an unknown amount of time, the donkey cart suddenly stopped. Immediately after, there was the sound of swords clashing against each other. Looking at the dozen or so people who suddenly appeared in front of them and surrounded them, the old village chief and the man's faces turned pale and their bodies trembled. Mountain bandits. Ha 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 ha. I was worried that no one would come knocking on my door in the next few days. What are you waiting for? Get off the car. Take out all the money. The man in the lead laughed loudly with his hands on his hips. He ordered people to drag the old village chief and the man off the donkey cart. Chapter 44:13. Hearing this, the old village chief panicked and hurriedly said, Sir, those are my 3 grandsons. Please be magnanimous. Get lost. The leader of the bandits kicked the village chief to the ground and gestured, Bring those 3 brats down. However, when the 2 bandits reached out to pull Yu down from the donkey cart, Mu Chin, who was beside Yu picked up a branch and hit the hand that was reaching for her. Whoosh! Hiss! The bandit cried out in pain and retracted his hand. When he saw the brat hit him with a branch, his eyes flashed with murderous intent. "Brat, you're courting death." His other hand viciously slashed at Mu-chin. Clang! At that moment, Hao-er stepped forward and pulled out the dagger on his leg to block the knife that was slashing towards his younger brother. A hidden force surged in his hand, and at the same time, the dagger in his hand was slashed towards his younger brother's neck. Whoosh! Hiss! The speed was so fast that the bandit didn't even have time to react. He only sucked in a breath of cold air before his eyes widened and he fell backwards in fear. Thud! His body fell to the ground and blood seeped out from his neck, staining the sand red. Everyone outside was stunned. However, Hao-er's hand trembled as he held the dagger tightly. His small face was cold and stern as he stared at the dead bandit on the ground with determination and coldness in his eyes. He spoke clearly to his sisters-in-law, who were staring at the scene with wide eyes. "Mother said to never show mercy to those who want to kill you. Before they can kill you, you have to kill them first." He took a deep breath and looked at Mu-chin and Mu-yu. "Do you remember?" "Yes." The two little guys recovered. Although there was a trace of fear in their eyes, it was more of determination. The village chief and the leader looked at the bandit on the ground in shock. They watched him twitch on the ground until he breathed his last. In just a short while, they could not help but hold their breaths and look at the three children who came out from behind the curtain. When the leader saw his brother killed, he thought that there was someone powerful hiding in the donkey cart. He did not expect that there were only 3 children coming out from behind the curtain. Among the 3 children, the oldest was no more than 8 or 9 years old, and the youngest was no more than 3 years old. However, they looked very delicate and outstanding. With one look, one could tell that they were not the old man's grandchildren as the old man had said. However, at this moment, the older child was holding a dagger in his hand and looking at him with a stern little face. That kind of gaze made him feel an inexplicable chill in his heart, but after he recovered, he felt a little embarrassed and angry. He was actually intimidated by an 8 or 9-year-old child. Damn it! What are you waiting for? Capture them for me. The man in the lead shouted as he waved his knife and ordered his men to step forward. Take care of yourselves. Hao-er said and held the dagger tightly in his hand. In the next moment, his figure flashed forward. Even if his cultivation hadn't recovered, with his body movements and the training he had received, his instinctive attacks were already unstoppable for those lowly bandits. Hao-er did not leave anyone alive and slaughtered the dozen or so bandits one by one. When the leader saw the dead people on the ground, his face turned pale with fright and he turned to run. Chapter 44:14. He's flying. The old village chief and the burly man were dumbfounded. They could only see a visible stream of air condensing under his feet. Then, with a tap of his foot, he flew more than 10 meters away. Just as the burly man was about to attack with his dagger, the bandit suddenly turned around and raised his hand. Shio! An arrow shot out from his sleeve. Whoosh! Hao-er quickly dodged. His body's instinctive reaction had already evaded when he sensed danger. At the same time, he attacked with his palm. The 8 or 9-year-old child hit the bandit several meters away. Pfft! The bandit spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. He looked in horror at the child who was walking towards him step by step. Who are you? Hao-er didn't speak. Instead, he stepped forward and slit the bandit's throat. When the old village chief and the burly man saw this, their legs went soft and they fell to the ground. Their bodies were trembling. They didn't know if it was because they saw more than 10 bandits dead, or because they were frightened by Hao-er's ruthlessness, or because they saw something they shouldn't have seen. No one knew that How's hands were trembling. After he killed the last bandit, he didn't stand up for a long time. Until the two little fellows trotted to his side. "Big brother, how are you?" Her soft voice was filled with unconcealable concern. Two identical little faces looked at him worriedly. Hearing their voices, How took a deep breath and turned around. "I'm fine." Grandpa Village Chief and the others seemed to be frightened. You obediently tugged at How's sleeve, indicating for him to look at the two people sitting on the ground. "Grandpa Village Chief, Uncle." How walked over and looked at them. The two looked at him with complicated expressions. How, you. Grandpa Village Chief, if I didn't kill them, they would have killed us. How's little face was cold. He said, "My brother and sister are still young. They can't protect themselves, so I have to protect them. Moreover, my mother said to never show mercy to those who want to kill us. So, they all have to die." The village chief and the burly man also knew that those bandits killed people without batting an eyelid. However, when they saw those bandits, who killed without batting an eyelid, being killed by a child who was not even 10 years old, they still found it unbelievable. Were all the children of the aristocratic families out there already so powerful? Also, they seemed to have seen him fly up earlier. "Grandpa Village Chief, Uncle, my big brother is a good person, they are bad people." You stepped forward, and hugging How's hand, she said to the two people who were paralyzed on the ground, "My big brother is really a good person, you don't need to be afraid of him." The tender voice entered their ears softly. This made the old village chief and the burly man feel guilty. The old village chief hurriedly said, "We're not afraid of him. It's just that we've never seen so many people die. We can't get over it all of a sudden." As he spoke, the old village chief stood up with his walking stick and said, "We have to deal with these corpses." Thus, he got the burly man beside him to help. Chapter 44:15. Howler thought for a moment and took the money from the small bag. He took out some of it and handed it to them. "Grandpa Village Chief, Uncle, this is for you." This won't do." They hurriedly waved their hands. "We didn't do anything. How can we take these things?" No, you can keep it for yourselves." "Take it." Howler stuffed it into their hands and said, "Let's go quickly." Seeing this, the burly man looked at the village chief and then looked at the money in his hands. He was a little troubled. "Just take it." The old village chief thought for a moment and let him take it. He then reminded him, "You're young. Remember not to show your wealth, lest you be targeted in the future." "Yes, we know." Howler nodded in response. They got on the donkey cart and continued to head in the direction of the town. Along the way, the old village chief and the burly man had many things to ask, but every time the words reached their mouths, they swallowed them back. There were some things that they should not know. It was better for them not to ask. Knowing too much was not a good thing. The donkey cart moved slowly. It was not fast, but as time passed bit by bit, they arrived at the town near noon. "Look, this is the town. This town is very big. Many of the nearby villages are in the same market as this town." The old village chief looked back at the three of them and asked, "What do you plan to do when you reach the town?" The two little ones naturally looked at Howler. They were still young and could not make up their minds. Naturally, they would wait for their elder brother to decide. "We'll see when the time comes," Howler said. In fact, he did not have any plans yet. He had to see the situation first. When they entered the town and came to a corner, the old village chief asked, "Can we get off here?" Yes, let's get off here. As Hao spoke, he got off the donkey cart and carried his younger brother and sister down. Then, he respectfully bowed to the two of them. Thank you, Grandpa Village Chief and Uncle. The two of them hurriedly turned to the side to avoid him. We don't dare. Although they knew that their identities were not ordinary and that they were just a few children, their hearts still skipped a beat when they thought of the scene on the road. They did not dare to accept their bow. Grandpa Village Chief, Uncle, we'll be going then. Yu's soft voice was full of smiles. Her delicate and cute little face overflowed with a pleasant smile. She was really very cute. You must be careful and take good care of yourselves. The old village chief could only say so. In reality, even if they wanted to help them, they couldn't. Thus, Hao left with Mu Qin and Mu Yu. He watched them curiously look left and right as they walked into the street. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that such young children could kill more than a dozen bandits. On the street, Yu was happily looking at the things on the stalls. Especially when she saw some trinkets, she couldn't take a step forward, and directly stood on her tiptoes to look at them. Chapter 44:16. Hearing this, the little one's eyes lit up and couldn't help but look up at her two elder brothers. Seeing this, Hao showed a doting smile and reached out to touch her little head, saying, "If you wants it, then let's buy it." As he spoke, he saw that Qin was also staring at the clay figurines, so he said to the peddler, "Make one for each of them according to their appearance." "Okay, just wait for a while." The peddler was delighted and immediately used various colored clay figurines to make them according to their appearance. After a while, a small clay figurine wearing a pink dress with two small buns on its head was made. The peddler smiled and handed it over. "Come, little girl, this is yours." Looking at the lifelike clay figurine, Yu smiled happily. "It really looks like a little me." She looked up at Hao and asked, "Big brother, don't you want it?" Hao shook his head. "Big brother doesn't want it." After a while, the peddler handed another clay figurine to Qin saying, "Here, this is yours." Qin took it. Although his little face looked like a little adult, it was difficult to hide his joy. He carefully held it and looked at it carefully, and found that it really looked like a little person. Hao paid the money and took them away, saying, "Big brother will take you to eat something. After eating, if you want to walk around, Big brother will accompany you. Yu wants to eat drumsticks." Yu happily said, holding Hao's hand. "Okay." Hao responded and looked at Mu Qin, asking, "What about Qin?" "I'm fine with anything." The little one said, indicating that he was not picky. The three well-dressed and exquisite children walking on the street were very eye-catching, but they didn't know it. They walked and strolled all the way until they came to a high-end restaurant. At the corner of the street, a few people who were leaning against the wall and eating melon seeds looked at each other. After revealing a malicious smile, they continued to stare outside the restaurant. "Those three children are really not ordinary good-looking, and I saw that there are no adults or guards following them," one of them said. "These three children don't look like children from ordinary families. Looking at the material of their clothes, I guess they should be from a big family, right? Are we really going to pick on these people? What's more, the older one looks to be almost 10 years old. Isn't he a little too old? He's already so sensible." The other person was a little hesitant. It's obvious that these three children are from other places. They don't have any adults by their side, and they look so exquisite and pretty. If we kidnap them, we can definitely sell them for a good price." As the leader of the group spoke, his eyes flashed. He was calculating in his heart, forget about the older one. She's old and sensible, so it's not easy to sell her. But the two little ones, with their delicate appearance, I'll definitely fight to buy her. But, if he really is a disciple of some aristocratic family, wouldn't it be? Another person was still a little worried. Gee! That person glanced at him and said, in our line of work, why would we be afraid of being investigated? To earn this kind of money, you have to take this kind of risk. What can you accomplish if you shrink back and do things? After being reprimanded, the man couldn't help but lower his head and ask in a low voice, then what should we do? Chapter 44:17. At the same time, the three children in the restaurant did not know that they had been targeted. At this moment, the three of them were sitting in the restaurant. The waiter looked at them and asked with a smile, "Young master and young miss, what would you like to eat?" However thought for a bit and said, "Give us a few of the more delicious dishes in your restaurant, and also a stewed chicken soup and 3 bowls of rice." Then he asked, "Do you have any pastries?" Hearing this, the waiter was slightly surprised because he heard that they wanted 3 bowls of rice and saw that there were only 3 of them, but no adults were accompanying them. He suppressed his surprise and hurriedly said, "Yes, yes, yes. Our restaurant's osmanthus cake and lotus cake are the most delicious. Do you want to order one of each?" "Okay, that's all." Hao said. "Okay, please sit for a while." The waiter was about to turn around and leave, but he stopped and asked, "Do you have any adults accompanying you?" "What's wrong?" Hao's face turned cold, and there was some displeasure in his eyes. The waiter was a waiter and was good at observing people's expressions. Seeing his face turn cold, he hurriedly said with a smile, "Young master, don't misunderstand. It's just that you don't have any adults accompanying you, and you ordered these dishes. Do you have money to pay?" Hearing this, Hao glanced at him and took out a money bag from his lapel and put it on the table. "Do you think I have money to pay?" Seeing that heavy money bag, the waiter immediately smiled and said, "Please wait a moment. The dishes will be served immediately." It was not that he wanted to ask this, but the restaurant's rules were like this. After all, they were also afraid of eating without paying. Not long after, the dishes were served one after another. Smelling the fragrance of the food, the 3 children had a big appetite. The 2 children were relatively short, so they couldn't reach the dishes on the table while sitting on the chair. Therefore, Hao called the waiter to bring 2 small stools for them to sit on. "Come, eat a bit more." Hao helped them pick up the dishes and said, "Eat slowly, don't eat too fast." He also helped them ladle a bowl of soup and slowly ate by himself. Big brother, the dishes here are delicious." Yu smiled and narrowed her eyes. She pointed at the ribs in the middle and said, "I want to eat that." "Okay, I'll help you. Eat more if it's delicious." Hao looked at her cheeks bulging like a little squirrel and couldn't help but smile dotingly. "Chen, what do you want to eat?" "I'll help you." He looked at Mu Chen and asked. "No, I can." Mu Chen said he picked up the dishes himself. The 3 children were not accompanied by an adult, but they were eating on the 2nd floor of this high-end restaurant. Naturally, it attracted the attention and curiosity of many people, especially after seeing the 3 children's outstanding appearance. They were even more surprised. This kind of first-class appearance did not belong to ordinary people. Moreover, the material of the clothes on the 3 of them was also a rare high-quality material. However, looking at the 3 of them looked very unfamiliar. They should not be local people. Across the table, an elegant man was drinking and chatting with a few friends. When he saw the 3 children, he also took a second look at them. His eyes were full of admiration and curiosity. Hearing these words, Yu blinked her eyes and looked at him, and with curiosity and surprise in her soft and sweet voice, she said, "Uncle, you are very awesome, to actually be able to see that our background is not ordinary." As soon as her soft voice fell, her beautiful eyes flashed cunningly, and she asked with a smile, "But uncle, do you know where we came from?" Listening to the little girl's soft words, Pan Ning was stunned for a moment, then he smiled happily, "Little girl, you're really interesting." He reached out his hand, wanting to tap the little one's nose, but was blocked by the little boy who looked exactly the same. "Don't touch my sister." Shen pulled a long face and shouted coldly. At the same time, he slapped his hand away. Chapter 44:19. Hearing this, Muchen didn't know whether he was joking or not. He stared at him coldly and defensively. Hao also stared at the man with a cold face. His childish voice was cold as he asked, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Pan Ning smiled and stopped teasing them. Instead, he poured a glass of wine and took a sip. "Don't worry, I'm not a bad person. I just saw that the three of you didn't have an adult by your side, so I came to take a look out of curiosity." He looked at Hao and said, "You guys sneaked out, right? Don't you know that this is very dangerous? Where are your parents? Or where do you live? I can get someone to help you send a letter and let them take you back." His children were already 4 or 5 years old. If they saw their children sneaking out by themselves, they would probably go crazy. These children's parents were also very careless. "I'm in the Phoenix Dynasty. Can you help us send a letter?" Yuer's eyes lit up and she asked with a smile. "Phoenix Dynasty?" Pan Ning was slightly surprised and couldn't help but look at the three of them. "As far as I know, there is no such thing as a Phoenix Dynasty on this mainland. You guys didn't remember wrongly, right?" Hao had long known that they were probably not on the same mainland as his parents. After all, there were no cultivators on this mainland. Only mortals were there, so naturally, it was impossible for them to know where the Phoenix Dynasty was. "Waiter, the bill!" Hao shouted. After the waiter came to settle the bill, he carried his siblings down from the chair and held each of them in one hand as they went downstairs. "Goodbye, uncle." Yuer turned back with a smile and waved at him. Looking at the little girl's likable appearance, Pan Ning smiled and waved back. After watching them leave, he returned to the table and continued to drink with his friends. Hao accompanied Mu Qin and Mu Yu to walk around the city and bought a lot of things. While walking and stopping, Hao couldn't help but look behind him. He kept feeling that someone was following them. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Mu Qin asked, puzzled. He had already turned back several times along the way. "Seems like someone is following us," Hao said, his cold little face tensed up. Hearing this, Yuer also couldn't help but look behind them. However, other than the people on the street, she didn't see anyone strange or suspicious. "It's getting late. Let's go back to the inn to rest." As Hao spoke, he didn't dare to let them stay outside for too long because he was worried about their safety. He immediately led them to the inn. After they left, the few people who followed them all the way spat on the ground and cursed, "That little bastard is smart." There were a few times when they wanted to make a move, but they didn't have the opportunity to do so. It was as if they knew that they were watching from the shadows. "Big brother, they seem to be heading towards the inn. What should we do?" another person asked. He didn't expect the three children to be so vigilant. "Come here, I'll tell you. Let's do this," the man in the lead said in a low voice. After he finished speaking, he led his people and left quickly in 2 groups. Hao held the 2 little ones' hands and walked all the way to the inn. However, suddenly, a group of beggars surged out of nowhere and actually squeezed towards them, separating the three of them in a few moments. You, Shin, Big brother. Big brother. Go away, don't push me. Chapter 44:20. Big brother. Big brother. Big brother. Was carried from behind, and a hand covered her mouth, then she ran towards the alley. Struggled with all her strength, but was unable to struggle free. Until she smelled a strange smell, then a gunny sack wrapped around her and tied her up. She inexplicably knew what that strange smell was. She also heard the people outside say that she was drugged, so she did not dare to speak. She just covered her small mouth and her eyes were red. She wanted to cry but did not dare to. She did not know why she was drugged and did not faint as the people who caught her said, but she knew that if they knew that she did not faint, they would not know how to deal with her. She was very scared, but she thought of what her big brother said. She could not be afraid. When she encountered danger, she had to think of a way to save herself. So, she closed her eyes and recalled what her big brother said to them. After the man who took you ran to a courtyard, he put her on the ground and laughed. How is it? Big brother, my idea is good, right? Look, this little girl is already in our hands. Big brother, I'll contact the people right away and sell her tonight. Another man said and grinned. Thinking of the shining silver, even his footsteps suddenly became light. On the other side, looked at the beggars who were squeezing over. He was so angry that his little face was covered with frost. Seeing his sister being taken away, his eyes were bloodshot and he shouted angrily, "Go away." That voice contained a breath of spiritual power. That shout immediately made those beggars scream and squat down with their hands on their heads. Another man who put Mu-Chen in a sack and ran felt pain in his 7 orifices. It seemed that blood was oozing out. He reached out and touched it. His nose and ears were bleeding. He looked back in horror and saw that the little boy who was less than 10 years old had blood-red anger in his eyes. His eyes were surging with killing intent. He was so scared that he trembled. He did not dare to stay for long and quickly carried the little boy who was struggling in the sack and ran into the other side of the alley. Give my brother back to me. Shouted angrily. He stepped on the beggars who were squatting down with their hands on their heads and quickly chased after them. The people on the street saw this scene and were stunned for a moment. Some of them gasped in disbelief. That is snatching a child on the street. Quick! Hurry up and report it to the authorities. How hateful! A woman angrily pushed the man beside her and urged him to report it to the authorities. Some people frowned and didn't want to meddle in other people's business. After all, no one knew if there was someone behind this. What if they were retaliated against? Some people looked at the beggars who were squatting on the ground and holding their heads. They looked up one after another, but all of them were bleeding from their eyes and noses. It was a horrifying sight. The commotion here quickly attracted the attention of the soldiers. After the soldiers questioned the surrounding people, they quickly joined in the pursuit. On the other side, looked at the 2 alleys and clenched his fists tightly. He chased all the way here, but he didn't know that the enemy was familiar with the nearby alleys. As he chased, that person carried his younger brother and ran off somewhere. Chen, where are you? Unable to see the figures of her younger brother and sister, the tears that she had been holding back for a long time finally fell uncontrollably. Chapter 44:21. The sky gradually darkened. Was still searching. As for those soldiers, for some reason, they retreated after searching for a while. In a remote courtyard, Mu Chen's hands and feet were tied, and his mouth was stuffed with a ball of cloth, so he could not speak. Yu lay quietly in the open gunny sack next to him, not daring to move. She knew that her brother was also caught, and that these bad people wanted to catch them and sell them. Big brother, these 2 children have been caught, and the soldiers outside have also retreated. Should we send them out of the city now? A man asked, looking at their big brother. Have you contacted the people over there? The man looked at them and asked. Yes, they are already waiting at the usual place. But I don't know if we should send the children out of the cellar this time. Or wait for a few days before sending the others out. Let's get rid of these 2 brats first. Their appearances are too eye-catching. If we leave them here for too long, I'm afraid that something unexpected will happen. Go and prepare immediately. We'll send them away now. Okay. They quickly arranged and secretly sent them out of the city under the cover of the night. On the other side, Pan Ning, who was slightly drunk with a few friends, was waving goodbye to them when a low-key but luxurious carriage slowly came and stopped in front of him. Just as he was about to get into the carriage, he caught a glimpse of a small figure walking in the night. He raised his eyebrows and looked. Wasn't it one of the 3 children who ate in the restaurant during the day? He suddenly spoke, frowning slightly. The smile on his face disappeared as he looked at the child. The 2 little guys he had been protecting were gone. With how much he cherished them, he would not let them out of his sight. Go and bring him here. He sat in the carriage, but did not enter it. Instead, he sat outside. Yes. In the shadows, a shadow guard quickly came forward and stood in front of Hao. Before he could speak, he saw the child, who had his head lowered, suddenly raise it. His eyes were filled with viciousness, and he was startled for a moment. My master wants you to go over. As the secret guard spoke, he saw the child's guarded expression and added, he's over there. You met him in the afternoon. Hao followed his hand and saw the elegant man leaning against the carriage, waving at him. After hesitating for a moment, Hao walked over. Did something happen? Where are your younger siblings? Pan Ning asked directly. Upon hearing this, Hao gritted his teeth and said, gone. Hearing this, Pan Ning frowned and said to the shadow guard, go and check the whereabouts of the 2 children. Yes. With that, he left in a flash. Seeing this, Hao looked at him and asked, who are you? Can you help me find them? Pan Ning smiled and said, my name is Pan Ning, from the imperial capital, the eldest young master of the Pan family. However, you wouldn't know even if I told you. He waved his hand and patted the seat beside him, saying, come up and sit for a while. Tell me, how did you manage to make them disappear? Hao paused for a moment, walked forward and asked again, can you find them? Pan Ning smiled and said, with my connections, of course, there's no problem. Of course, as long as they are still in the city. Chapter 44-22. After listening to him, Pan Ning shook his head and sighed. I've already warned you. You 3 children are too eye-catching outside. It's easy to be targeted. As he spoke, he looked at the children's cold faces and said, with your looks, not only will human traffickers target you, even those with dirty intentions will target you. Therefore, you can imagine how dangerous it is for the 3 of you to be outside. Hao pursed his lips and didn't speak. He only wanted to know where his brother and sister were now. Seeing him sitting there with his head lowered and lips pursed with self-blame, Pan Ning smiled. Don't worry. We lost them in the evening. We'll find them now. Pan Ning's subordinates were very efficient. In less than an hour, the secret guard had found out who had captured them. He whispered into Pan Ning's ear about the people behind these people and saw Pan Ning's face turn cold. However, before he could speak, he saw the child sitting next to him suddenly leap into the night. He couldn't help but be shocked by the way he moved. This child actually has such skills? He muttered. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Hao had already entered the alley. His face changed and he said, "Quickly follow him. This child probably heard what you said just now." He quickly got out of the carriage and rushed into the night with the secret guard. That's right. Hao heard what the secret guard said to Pan Ning. He was a cultivator and sat next to Pan Ning. No matter how low the secret guard's voice was, he could still hear it. After learning the location from the secret guard, he quickly went to the alley. He had passed by the alley courtyard that the shadow guard had mentioned several times today, but he didn't know that his younger brother and sister were locked up inside. Thinking of this, his eyes shot out a fierce light like that of a wolf cub. Daring to capture his younger brother and sister, he would definitely not let those people off. When he found the courtyard, he could faintly hear the sound of drinking and having fun inside. He directly lifted his foot and kicked open the courtyard door and walked inside. Who dares to behave atrociously here? The people drinking inside heard the sound and came out to take a look. When they saw that it was the boy from the day, they couldn't help but sneer. Yo! Boy, you're quite capable. You actually found this place. Where are my younger siblings? Hao asked with a cold face. He looked at those people who had captured Mu Chen and Mu Yu today. He couldn't help but feel hatred in his heart and clenched his fists tightly. Seeing that he was alone, they didn't try to hide anything and laughed out loud. Those two little things, we sold them so easily. See, we got the money. As they spoke, they patted the money pouches on their waists. Upon hearing this, Hao's eyes turned red. Sold. How dare you betray my brother and sister? Where did you sell them? Ha 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 ha, if we don't tell you, what can you do to us? Little brat, hurry up and scram. Otherwise, humph. The leader snorted coldly. If it wasn't for the fact that this brat was too old, he wouldn't have left him here. Damn it. All of you deserve to die. Hao's voice turned cold. He loosened his clenched fists and moved his hand. The dagger tied to his leg was in his hand. In the next moment, he leaned forward and attacked the leader. None of the men saw how he made his move. When they came back to their senses, they saw that the leader was already kneeling on the ground with a sharp dagger against his neck. Chapter 44-23. Ah! Don't kill me. With the sharp blade against his neck, he could only feel his skin being cut and blood seeping out. The pain caused him to cry out in alarm. His body stiffened and he didn't dare to move, fearing that the sharp blade against his neck would cut his throat. Speak! Where did you sell them? Hao shouted again with a murderous look in his eyes. I sold them. I already transported them to the imperial capital overnight. Ah! Just as he finished speaking, Hao slashed the dagger in his hand. At the same time, blood splattered out and that person fell down with a scream. Ah! When the other people saw this scene, they were so shocked that their eyes widened. They rolled and crawled in several directions, trying to escape. However, how could Hao, whose murderous intent had been aroused, allow them to escape? Looking at the people fleeing in different directions, he stabbed the dagger into the ground with a cold face. In the next moment, with a move of his hand, a long sword glowing with light appeared in front of him. As he gathered the sword in his hands, it split into two, then into four, and attacked in four directions. Die! The cold voice carried a terrifying murderous intent. The flying sword flew out with a whoosh and attacked the four people at a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover. Whoosh! Ah! The sharp sound of the long sword sliced through the air. With a swoosh, it pierced into the hearts of those people from behind. Sharp and mournful screams came out from their mouths, resounding in the night and spreading out. When Pan Ning and the shadow guards arrived at the courtyard, they were immediately stunned by the scene in the courtyard. The courtyard was covered in blood. One person had already died, and the other people who were preparing to flee were also killed by the flying sword. What shocked them even more was that after killing those people, the flying swords disappeared one by one, leaving only one of them. As for the remaining one, it was the one that had killed the man who was running towards them. The originally sharp and intimidating flying sword was now heading towards them after passing through the man's body. The powerful aura on the blade of the sword had completely stunned them, causing them to be unable to move under the killing intent. They could only stare with wide eyes at the sharp sword that had stopped between their eyebrows. Pan Ning, who had never lost his composure like this, had his mind completely blank at this moment. The only thing in front of him was the sword blade that seemed to have a life of its own. At this moment, he could clearly feel a terrifying pressure. This kind of pressure caused cold sweat to seep out from his forehead, making him unable to move his body. Immortal. These two words inexplicably appeared in his mind. Only the legendary immortals could control swords. Only the legendary immortals had this ability. However, what he did not expect was that this immortal was actually a child less than 10 years old. Who was furious when he heard that his sister-in-law had been sold, pursed his lips when he saw the two of them being shocked by the pressure. He turned his hand and shouted, "Come back." The long sword returned to his side with a whoosh and was then stored in the space. Seeing the long sword disappear into thin air, Pan Ning's heart thumped loudly. He suppressed the shock in his heart and hurriedly asked, Have you found the whereabouts of your brother and sister? Are they here?" Howler looked at him with a cold expression on his little face. "You'd better not spread what you saw just now." Chapter 44-24. Even the bodyguard, who had undergone strict training, was stunned at this time. When he heard his master's words and saw the child's cold gaze, his heart trembled and he immediately straightened his back. "Little master, don't worry, I will keep this a secret." This child, after seeing him kill those people and ride the sword, he no longer dared to treat him as an ordinary child. Even if he had no common sense, he knew that this child was definitely not ordinary. Howler retracted his gaze and looked at Pan Ning. "My brother and sister were sold by them and are being sent to the capital." Pan Ning heard this and knew what he meant. "If they are going to the capital, I know which way they will take. Let's go after them now." Hao nodded. When he turned around, his footsteps paused and he looked at the courtyard. "There are children inside. You stay here and rescue those children and settle them down. Also, clean up this place." Pan Ning looked at the bodyguard and instructed. "Yes." The bodyguard responded. After watching them leave, he quickly went inside to search and rescue the children locked in the cellar. It was late at night. At the same time, on the mountain road out of the city, a horse carriage was galloping. The driver was a man and a slightly plump middle-aged man. Inside the carriage, Mu Chen and Mu Yu were tied up. Perhaps they thought that it was just two children, so they did not take any precautions. After all, the two children looked less than 3 years old. What could they do at such a young age? At this time, in the carriage, the two children who were originally closed quietly opened their eyes. Those people used drugs on them, but those drugs did not seem to have any effect on their bodies. However, they pretended to be asleep until now. Brother, let's quietly escape. You whispered in his ear. Muchin nodded and the two of them looked around, thinking of an idea. After a while, Muchin whispered in her ear. Muyu listened carefully and nodded. Woo-woo, mother, mother. Muyu suddenly started to cry. At this time, Muchin also anxiously called out, Sister, sister, what's wrong? The slightly plump middle-aged man driving the carriage outside heard the commotion and frowned. He lifted the curtain and asked, What's wrong with you two? He was puzzled. They were clearly drugged, so how did they wake up so quickly? My stomach hurts. Yu pursed her lips and said with a crying voice. You two are so troublesome. The slightly plump middle-aged man glared at them unhappily and then shouted, Stop by the side and let the two children go to relieve themselves. Come here, I'll help you untie the rope. The middle-aged man said in an unfriendly tone. Yu obediently went over. Looking at the untied rope, she pursed her small mouth and said with a crying tone, It's too dark outside, I don't dare to go alone. Big brother, accompany me. Go, go, go. It's settled while you're at it. I won't stop you on the way anymore. In the middle of the night, the middle-aged man felt that the child would not dare to escape since he was so young. Moreover, they were watching. Thus, he untied the little boy as well. Chapter 44-25. We can't run now. Let's wait until they let down their guard. The two of them squatted in the bushes for a while and obediently walked back. When they got on the carriage, they saw the middle-aged man was about to tie them up again. Yu said, Uncle, can you not tie them up? My hand hurts. She rubbed her small hand. Because children's skin was more tender, there were already several bruises. The middle-aged man thought that these two little rascals would be sold to a rich family. Seeing that they were indeed young, even if he didn't tie them up, they wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, he snorted and said, Be obedient and stay inside. Otherwise, you will suffer. The two children were pushed inside and sat inside the carriage. As the carriage started to move again, the two were also worried that their big brother would be worried if he couldn't find them. But, after all, they were only 2 or 3 years old children. Even if they were smart, facing two adults, even if they had a dagger in their space, they didn't dare to take it out. Big brother, look. Yu took out a pill from her space and smiled like a little fox. Big brother gave this to me. We can use it. Looking at the pill, Muchen's eyes flashed. He thought of the medicine that their big brother gave them. It seemed that there was a kind of medicine that could make people unconscious. Thus, his eyes lit up and he took the pill from Yu's hand. Lowering his voice, he said, Sit down, let me do it. Saying that, he took out a fist-sized luminous pearl from his space. He crushed the pill and smeared it on it. Then, he took it out. Uncle, I'll give you this pearl. Can you let us go? Muchin said, holding the pearl in both hands and placing it between the two men. In the darkness of the night, a dazzling light suddenly spread out, startling the driver and the chubby middle-aged man. They immediately stopped the carriage and looked back, only to see the child holding a glowing bead and handing it to them for them to see. Hiss! This is a luminous pearl. The chubby middle-aged man sucked in a breath of cold air and somewhat inconceivably moved forward. How can there be such a big luminous pearl? Is this really a luminous pearl? It was also the first time that the driver had seen such a treasure. He couldn't help but move closer to look at it. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that the bead was shining like a bright moon. It was unbelievably beautiful. This is the first time I've seen such a treasure. How much is it worth? The man's eyes were filled with greed. He wanted to reach out to touch it, but the middle-aged man slapped his hand away. This is a priceless treasure. Don't touch it. As the middle-aged man spoke, he took the pearl with both hands and stared at Mu-chin suspiciously. How did you get such a pearl? Where did you get it? When the two little brats took it, their clothes were still intact and they didn't have anything valuable on them. Where did they get this treasure from? Hearing this, Mu-chen's eyes narrowed. He pursed his lips and did not speak. He only looked at them and brushed the powder off his hands. Looking at his clapping hands, the middle-aged man was about to say something when he saw the man suddenly fall down. He was shocked and turned around to look at the child. Unexpectedly, what greeted him was a punch from the child. Bang! Mu-chen's clenched little hand condensed a thin trace of spiritual aura. He punched out heavily and directly knocked the man out. Chapter 44-26. Ah! The chubby man cried out in pain as he fell backward and rolled out of the carriage. The luminous pearl in his hand also rolled to the side of the road. Just as he was about to stand up, he felt dizzy and fainted. The two children jumped down from the carriage. Yu-her quickly picked up the luminous pearl and wiped it clean. Holding it in her arms, she looked up and saw her brother taking out a dagger. She was shocked and asked, "Brother, what are you doing?" "Killing them," Mu-chin said as he stared at the two people on the ground. If he took out the night luminescent pearl, these two people would die. Although he had never killed anyone before, he had seen his big brother do it before. However, when he held the dagger and looked at the people on the ground, he didn't dare to attack. "Brother." Yu hurried to his side and held his hand. "Brother, let's not kill them. We have medicine. If we feed them, they will die." Hearing this, Mu-chin slowly put down the dagger as if he was relieved. He looked at Yu. Do you have poison?" "Yes." Yu smiled and took out a small medicine bottle from her space. She poured out 2 small pills and stuffed them into the mouths of the two people on the ground. Then, she took out some water and poured it down their throats. "It's done," Yu said as she squatted at the side and watched with wide eyes. She pestered her brother to give her the medicine, but her brother only said that it was poison and that people would die if they ate it. So, she wanted to see what would happen to the people who died after eating it. Seeing his cute little sister squatting beside the two people and watching how they were poisoned to death, Mu-chen's mouth twitched. He only felt that his sister was really careless. "Brother, their nose and eyes are bleeding," Yu said in surprise and quickly backed away. She patted her small chest and said, "It's so scary, so scary." Mu-chin glanced at her and silently looked away. It was late at night, and she was holding the luminous pearl in her arms and looking at the two corpses with blood flowing out of their 7 orifices under the light. It was indeed scary. "Brother, let's go back and look for brother. Big brother couldn't find us, so he must be anxious and crying," Yu said while holding Yimingzhu with one hand and holding his hand with the other hand. "Well, let's go back and find big brother." Mu-chin nodded. He also knew that when they disappeared, big brother must be crying. At that moment, he held his sister's hand and walked back the way they came. They had the night luminescent pearls to illuminate the path, and the faint moonlight from the full moon in the sky. They also had 2 companions, so they didn't feel afraid along the way. Or perhaps, the 2 of them were too young and didn't know what fear was. As they walked, they chatted. "Brother, when can we become powerful? If we become powerful, those bad guys won't dare to capture us. If we work hard, we will become very powerful," Mu-chin said. Then when we grow up, will we become very powerful? Her's soft voice resounded in the dim light of night. Yes. Then when can we find our way home? Will father and mother come to find us? Father and mother don't know we're here. What should we do? We will definitely go home. Father and mother must be looking for us. Chapter 44:27. Because he could not see clearly who it was, Mu-chin put away the night pearl and told his sister to hide in the bushes. It was late at night, and he was afraid that they would be caught again. Pan Ning rushed over with Hao-er on horseback. Knowing that he was anxious, he comforted him. Don't worry, this is the only way to the capital. They probably won't use such a large number of boats to escort the two children, so they will only take this route. The junction of this route is not close, so I guess they haven't reached it yet and will catch up with us. Hao-er half crouched, his hand holding the reins. He looked ahead worriedly, hoping to see the figures of his brother and sister. However, when the horses galloped past the place where the two children were hiding, they did not even notice that there was someone in the bushes. Mu-chin and Mu-yut saw their brother sitting in front of the horse and quickly shouted, Big brother, we are here. Big brother. The horse galloped for dozens of meters and faintly heard voices coming from behind. Hao-er was startled and turned back abruptly. He saw the two children waving their little hands and calling him under the moonlight. My brother and sister are there. Go back quickly. Hao said in surprise and tightened the reins. Pan Ning also heard the sound behind him, and immediately turned his horse towards them. When he arrived in front of them, the horse stopped, and the child sitting in front of him had already jumped down. Chen-er, how are you? Are you hurt? Hao-er asked nervously and looked them up and down. Big brother, we are not hurt. The two children said in unison. Hao-er saw that the two were dirty but looked at him with bright eyes. He couldn't help but hug them tightly in his arms. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I didn't protect you well. Mu-chin clumsily patted his back and said, Big brother, we are fine. Don't worry. Yes, we are fine. Big brother, don't worry. Yu-er also copied her brother and patted his back. Pan Ning looked at the three children and finally felt relieved. He exhaled softly and looked at the two little ones with surprise in his eyes. How did such a small child escape? Moreover, in the face of such a situation, she was still able to calm down and comfort their brother. She was really sensible. How did you escape? What about the people who captured you? Pan Ning dismounted and asked. The two little ones glanced at him. When they saw him, Mu-chin didn't say anything. Yu-er smiled and greeted, Uncle. Looking at the little girl's sweet smile, Pan Ning also smiled, yes. Uncle, the bad guys are all dead. She smiled and said, so we ran away. As for how they died, she did not say. Hearing this, Pan Ning was slightly surprised. He wanted to ask, but he saw the three children talking together again, so he gave up. Knowing that their big brother was not an ordinary person, they reckoned that these two little ones were not ordinary either. It's late now, let's go back to the city. Pan Ning said, looking at the three of them. Hao-er responded and patted the heads of the two little guys. Chapter 44:28. It was already the second half of the night when they arrived at the city. They stayed in the inn with Pan Ning and took a bath before going to rest. Pan Ning wanted to ask them what they planned to do next, but seeing that it was so late and the three of them were children, he didn't say much and thought that he would ask them tomorrow. The next day, Pan Ning saw the three children come out of the door and walk down at about 7:00 in the morning. "Come over and eat something," Pan Ning shouted at them. Hao paused for a moment, then walked over with the two little ones and sat down at the table. Pan Ning scooped a bowl of porridge for each of them and said, "Eat some porridge first. This is chicken soup, the taste is not bad." "Thank you, uncle." You have thanked him sweetly. Pan Ning smiled and ordered some pastries. After eating another bowl of porridge with them, he asked people to remove the things on the table and asked, "What do you plan to do next?" The two little ones looked at their big brother. In fact, they were preparing to go to the imperial capital to take a look. Perhaps there would be people who knew about cultivation in a place like the imperial capital. Rather than asking the three of them, it was better to say that Pan Ning was also asking how. After all, among the three of them, he was the only one who could make the decision. "We plan to go to the imperial capital," Hao said. Pan Ning smiled and said, "Since that's the case, why don't you come with me? At least we can take care of each other on the way." He smiled and looked at the three of them, saying, "My house is in the imperial capital. I'm very familiar with that place. If you follow me, at least yesterday's incident won't happen again. Moreover, you can also stay in my house when you reach the imperial capital. At least it's much safer than you outside." Pan Ning smiled and said, "I also have a son at home. He's 4 or 5 years old and can accompany you." Hao frowned and asked, "Why do you want to help us?" Pan Ning was stunned by the question, then he smiled and looked at Hao, saying, "It's just a small matter. Don't worry, I don't have any ulterior motives." The two little ones looked at Pan Ning and then looked at their big brother. Although they didn't say anything, one of them looked around and the other looked down. No one knew what he was thinking. "All right, we'll go with you." In the end, Hao agreed. Hearing this, Pan Ning smiled and said, "I still have some things to deal with today. Tomorrow. We'll set off tomorrow. You can have a good rest. If there's anything you want to buy, I'll let the guards accompany you." "Yes." Hao responded and brought his younger brother and sister to the room upstairs. Pan Ning also left the room not long after. In the room, Muchin looked at him and asked, "Brother, are we really going with him?" "Yes, it will be better to follow him," Hao said. With a thought, he took out the communication jade and tried to contact his mother. However, the communication jade didn't work at all. "Take out yours and try," Hao gestured. Thus, Muchin and Muyu also took out their communication jade tablets to try, but there was still no response. It might have been cut off. Chapter 44-29. On the other side, Xianyuanmos and Fengjiu arrived at the palace where Sovereign Black Tortoise was. The two of them sat in the palace, drinking tea as they waited for Sovereign Black Tortoise to arrive. Hearing that Xianyuanmos and Fengjiu were here, Sovereign Black Tortoise did not have time to be surprised. He hurried over with his wife and child. Before he entered the palace, laughter rang out. "Ha ha ha ha, I heard that Sovereign Green Dragon and Ghost Doctor are here. What a surprise." He strode in and cupped his hands in greeting, saying, "This is the first time the two of you have come here. You should stay here for a few more days so that this lord can properly act as a host." Xianyuanmos and Fengjiu stood up and bowed. At the same time, they looked at Madame Black Tortoise and the child in her arms. "Ha ha ha, you've met my wife before. This is my son. I heard that you're here, so I asked my wife to bring my son along," Sovereign Black Tortoise said with a smile. "Greetings, Sovereign Green Dragon and Ghost Doctor." The beautiful woman held the child and bowed slightly. Madam, you don't have to be so polite, Fengjiu said as his gaze fell on the child in her arms. This was Hao Er's younger brother. Come. Sit. Sovereign Black Tortoise invited them to sit. He smiled and said, I heard that the two of you finally got rid of the Demon Lord. Even the Black Lotus of Destruction disappeared from the world. Congratulations. Xianyuan Mose and Feng Jiu couldn't help but look at each other when they heard the congratulatory words. Both of them smiled bitterly. Seeing their strange expressions, Sovereign Black Tortoise was slightly surprised. He asked, What's wrong? From the looks of it, you two don't seem to be very happy. Xianyuan Mose sighed softly and said, Today, we're here to explain something to Sovereign Black Tortoise. Seeing his serious expression, the Black Tortoise Sovereign's heart skipped a beat. He asked, May I know what the Azure Dragon Sovereign is talking about? Not long ago, not long after we returned home, the Devil Cultivators came out to wreak havoc. In the end, even the Devil Lord appeared and fought with us. I think the Black Tortoise Monarch already knew about it. Xianyuan Mose said in a low voice, his gaze landing on him. The Black Tortoise Overlord nodded. I've known about this for a long time. The commotion that day was so great that all parties were alarmed. However, no one knew exactly what happened during that battle. I was seriously injured in that battle. There were countless casualties. Although the Demon Lord died in the end and the Black Lotus of Destruction disappeared with him, there is one thing that the outside world does not know, Xianyuan Mose said slowly. Thinking of the scene that day, his heart was heavy. The Black Tortoise Monarch and his wife looked at each other and did not say anything. However, from their expressions, they could faintly tell that this was not a good thing. In order to take revenge on us, the Devil Lord used his heart's blood to activate the Blood Curse Ancient Array and sent the three children away through the Blood Curse Ancient Array. At the same time, he cut off our connection with them. Until now, we still do not know where they are. Fengjiu continued Xianyuan Mose's words. He looked at the Black Tortoise Monarch and his wife and said, Not only are our children missing, even Hao is missing with them. What? The Black Tortoise Monarch and his wife exclaimed in shock. They stood up abruptly. You mean, Hao's whereabouts are unknown? Yes. Fengjiu replied and looked down. Chapter 44:30. Although the child had not been close to them since he came back, he was still their flesh and blood. He was a child that they had carried for 10 months. Now, he was missing. Why is my child's life so bitter? She hugged the child in her arms and sobbed softly. She thought of the suffering he had experienced when he was young. It had only gotten better in the past few years, but now he was missing again. Her child was not even 10 years old and was wandering outside. What if something happened to him? Thinking of this, her tears fell uncontrollably. Sob, sob. Your Highness, sob, sob. The child in her arms saw his mother crying and also cried. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hall seemed somewhat depressing and sad. I'm sorry. It's my fault. If I hadn't let him stay by our side, this would not have happened, Fengjiu said guiltily. Alas. Monarch Xuanwu sighed and said, Ghost Doctor, you don't have to say these words. All these years, you have treated Hao like your own. We also know that. No one feels good when something like this happens. Moreover, your biological child is missing at such a young age. This is what makes people worried. Monarch Xuanwu sighed softly. He looked at Fengjiu, who was dressed in red but did not have much spirit. He knew in his heart that she probably did not have a good time during this period of time. His son was already 8 or 9 years old, but their children were not even 3 years old. They were wandering outside. If something really happened, they would not even have the ability to protect themselves. He did not say anything more. He only said, "You don't have to feel guilty about this. No one wanted such a thing to happen. Right now, it's better to send some people to search." Madame Xuanwu originally still had resentment in her heart. However, when she heard her husband's words and thought of how Fengzhou's children were not even 3 years old and also disappeared, she could not blame her for a moment. Only sympathy was left. Yes, it's better to quickly send some people out to search. 3 children are wandering outside. As parents, how can we be at ease? Madame Xuanwu said as she wiped away her tears. Xianyuan Mose held Fengzhou's hand and said to them, "We have already sent people to secretly search everywhere. We did not reveal it to the public because we were worried that once the news spread, they would be in danger. After all, they had many enemies. Even if a demon lord died, there were still many people who wanted to deal with them. It was just that those people did not have the strength to fight with them." "Then, do you have any way to find them?" Monarch Xuanwu asked. Xianyuan Mose shook his head and said in a deep voice, "The demon lord is very vicious." Upon hearing this, Monarch Xuanwu was stunned and asked, "How do you know that their contract beasts have not woken up?" Xianyuan Mose glanced at Fengzhou, who was narrowing his eyes, and then said to Monarch Xuanwu, "The contract beast in my daughter's body is an ancient 9-tailed spiritual fox. It has the ability to change space. If it wakes up, it will bring them back. Since there is no movement at the moment, we can deduce that their contract beasts have not woken up." Chapter 44-31. Hearing his words, the black tortoise monarch nodded, "I see. In that case, I will also send some people to secretly inquire about their whereabouts. If there is any news about them, I will inform you immediately." "Thank you." Xianyuan Mose cupped his hands in salute. "Since you are here, stay here for a few more days." As he spoke, he remembered that he only saw the 2 of them and did not see anyone following them. He was slightly surprised and asked, "Only the 2 of you came together this time? Your subordinates didn't come?" "No, we arranged for them to search for them. They did not follow us." As Xianyuan Mose spoke, he glanced at Fengzhou beside him and said, "This time, only the 2 of us came out." Seeing this, the black tortoise monarch nodded and said, "Then I will ask someone to prepare a place for you to rest. You have come all the way here. Rest here first." Xianyuan Mose and Fengzhou stood up and said, "No, this time we mainly came to tell you about our situation. We will not stay for long." Seeing that they insisted on leaving, the black tortoise monarch did not force them. He said, "All right, I will send you off." As he spoke, he made a gesture of invitation and walked out with them. He personally sent them off before returning. Seeing his wife standing at the entrance of the hall with the child in her arms, he walked over and asked, "Why are you not going back? Husband, do you think our son will come back?" She could not help but ask with worry in her eyes. "Alas, who knows? Now we don't even know where he is. How do we know whether he will come back or not?" The black tortoise monarch sighed softly and his mood was a little heavy. If he had stayed here obediently and not run to the Peach Blossom Cove, he probably would not have met Fengzhou and the others and such a thing would not have happened. She could not help but complain, say, "If he doesn't come back, then." Seeing that she was complaining, the black tortoise monarch shook his head and sighed. "Madam, if it wasn't for Fengzhou who saved our child and taught him carefully, he wouldn't be who he is today. Although our son is only 8 or 9 years old, he has learned different things since he was young. Don't worry. Even if he's wandering outside, he'll definitely be safe and sound. Their children aren't even 3 years old yet. If they're with Hao, it'll be fine. If not, I'm afraid. Hearing this, Madame Xuanwu said, I know, so I didn't blame them just now. After all, no one wants to see such a thing happen. As she spoke, she gently patted her son in her arms and said, the child is going to sleep. I'll take him to rest first. Looking at his wife leaving with the child in her arms, Monarch Black Tortoise sighed inwardly. In fact, as parents, they also knew that compared to their eldest son, they favored their youngest son more. Firstly, it was because their eldest son had grown up by Fengzhou's side since he was young and was closer to them. In addition, he had a cold personality. Even if he came back to live by their side for a few years, he was still indifferent to them. Naturally, they favored their youngest son more. Now that something had happened to their eldest son, as parents, they did not feel good. They were also worried and could only hope that he could return safely. Chapter 44-32. Alright, let's stay here for the night. Fengzhou rubbed her forehead. Suddenly, her hand paused, as if she had thought of something. Her eyes lit up, and she said, I have an idea. Perhaps we can find out where they are. Hearing this, Xianyuan was slightly surprised, and asked, what idea? Fengzhou revealed a smile, and said, Mo Chen's master, Tian Jizi. Hearing this, Xianyuan knew what she meant, and asked, you mean, we should go find Tian Jizi and ask him to point out the children's whereabouts for us? That's right. Fengzhou nodded, and said, instead of searching aimlessly in this vast sea of people, why don't we go find Tian Jizi? Even if he can't directly calculate the location of the 3 children in the heaven realm, he can at least point us in a direction. This way, it should be twice the result with half the effort. Fengzhou continued, when Mo Chen went down the mountain to look for the Star of the Phoenix, it was also because of his master's guidance. Since this is the case, why don't we give it a try? If that's the case, then let's go tomorrow. Xianyuan said as he held her in his arms and entered the inn first. They went to the first floor and sat down by the window, and he said, but today, you have to eat something good. You haven't eaten much recently, and you don't look very energetic. Yes, I will. Fengzhou said. Thinking that they would soon have clues about the children, her mood gradually improved. Thus, Xianyuan ordered a bowl of ginseng chicken soup, and a few dishes and rice that she liked to eat, and said, drink a bowl of soup first, then eat. After eating, we'll go out for a walk to digest the food, and then come back to rest. Okay. Fengzhou answered, and drank a bowl of soup first, then began to eat. The two of them finished their meal in the inn and paid for their room and meal. Then, they went out for a stroll in the streets. The Black Tortoise Palace was located in mid-air above the Black Tortoise continent, deep within the clouds. Ordinary people could not go there, so it was relatively safe. After they left there, they casually came to the town below. Now, looking at the prosperity of the city, the two of them felt that this area was not bad under the rule of the Black Tortoise sovereign. At least from the looks of it, the people here seem to be living quite well. I've heard from Du Fan that the Black Tortoise continent is well managed. Now it seems that it's true. Fengzhou said as he walked slowly with Xianyuan beside him. There are conflicts everywhere. We can only see the surface. However, compared to other places, this city is quite prosperous. Xianyuan said slowly. The two of them chatted as they walked, and they were already used to the stunned gazes of the people around them. Therefore, they did not pay much attention to the gazes that fell on them. However, among those gazes, there were a few that were faintly looking at Fengzhou with a predatory gaze. As soon as that gaze landed on her, it wasn't just her, but Xianyuanmo's also sensed it right away. With the strength of the two of them, the gazes of those people could not hide from their keen senses. Fengzhou did not pay attention to them, but Xianyuanmo's glanced at them indifferently. Those gazes were from a few men in brocade clothes on the second floor of a nearby restaurant. He only glanced at them coldly, then retracted his gaze. However, those men who were staring at Fengzhou suddenly screamed and held their heads with both hands. Hiss! Ah! Chapter 44-33. Oh no! It's a divine sense attack. A middle-aged man's expression changed, and he hurriedly helped up a man in embroidered robes who had fallen to the ground. Young master! Young master! Quickly help the young master back. The second floor of the restaurant was in a mess. Everyone gathered around and whispered. They only knew that the young masters of several families in the city were carried back together, but they did not know what had happened. Fengzhou did not even look at the scene in the restaurant. She walked with Xianyuanmo's, and the two of them strolled around the city. In the evening, the two of them were ready to go to the inn, but at this time, they were surrounded by hundreds of people. Elder, it's these two people. Yes, family head, it's them. It's this man who used his divine sense to hurt the young master. Several clans surrounded Xianyuanmo's and Fengzhou. They couldn't help but rage when they thought about how their sons had been injured by the divine sense and couldn't recover and advance in a short period of time. Who are you? Why did you hurt my son? A family head shouted angrily. He released his pressure and glared at the indifferent two people in front of him. It was undeniable that the appearances of these two people were extremely outstanding. Even if he had seen all kinds of people, he still couldn't help but secretly praise them. However, these two people shouldn't have hurt his son. This was truly intolerable. Who are you? Tell us your names. Another elder shouted angrily. How dare you hurt the young masters of our families? I think you don't want to live anymore. Who sent you here? What are you trying to do by hurting the young masters of our families? Shouts rang out one after another, and the surrounding people couldn't help but retreat. Only the hundreds of people brought by these few clans were left on the large street. You want to know who we are? Fengzhou glanced at them, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. If I tell you, I'm afraid your legs will go weak. What an arrogant and ignorant woman. An elder shouted, in this city, our families are the most respected. If you want to behave atrociously, you should ask around and see if our families are easy to mess with. What's the point of talking so much nonsense with them? This woman has a demonic face that can bring calamity to a country and its people. She will be a scourge if we keep her alive. Why don't we just kill her? Another middle-aged man said as he stared at Fengzhou with a murderous look. That's right. Let's kill them. Another person agreed. A thin elder stared at Fengzhou, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. He said, it's too easy to kill her. Why don't we kill the man beside her? As for the woman, I'll bring her back to test. Xianyuanmo's and Fengzhou listened to them talking. Some said to kill her, some said to bring her back to test medicine, and some even said she was a disaster. Xianyuanmo's face gradually turned cold, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his deep black eyes. However, these people did not know. Fengzhou smiled. She sneered in her heart at their comments. Her cold gaze swept across their mouths as she said to Xianyuanmo's beside her, you're right. No matter where you are, there will always be disputes. Especially those things that can't see the light of day, they can't be avoided. Chapter 44-34. Fengjiu smiled and said, "Why would we need you to deal with these people? However, do you believe that even if we say our names, they won't believe us?" Hearing this, Xianyuan Mo's expression changed slightly. He looked at her and the corners of his lips curled up slightly, but he didn't say anything. She smiled and her eyes glowed. Her gaze fell on the leaders of the group. She imitated them and raised her chin arrogantly. She asked, "Do you know who we are?" Hearing this, those people were slightly startled. They couldn't help but look at each other. One of them narrowed his eyes and asked, "Who are you?" "I am the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, and he is my husband, Xianyuan Mo's." Sure enough, the moment her voice fell, the surroundings fell silent. Then, a burst of laughter erupted. "Ha ha 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 ha. She actually said that she is the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. Ha 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 ha, what a joke, what a joke. She actually dares to impersonate the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. She even said that the person beside her is Xianyuan Mo's. Does she know that Xianyuan Mo's is the Azure Dragon Sovereign, and that ghost Dr. Fengjiu is the Star of the Phoenix? They have always appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Even if they go out, they will bring their subordinates with them. Look at them, there are only 2 of them. They don't even have anyone following them. How dare they impersonate the ghost Dr. Fengjiu and the Azure Dragon Sovereign? How audacious! What a joke! I think they are tired of living." Seeing their reactions, Fengjiu seemed to have expected it. The smile on her lips deepened. She said to Xianyuan Mo's beside her, "How is it? Isn't it? Even if I say it, these people won't believe that you and I are real. It seems that your mood has improved." Xianyuan Mo said slowly, and the coldness on her face dissipated a little. Thinking of the decision to find Tianjizi, she felt that even if she couldn't specify a place, it would save a lot of time. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before she could find the children. Therefore, her mood gradually recovered. Coupled with the appearance of these people, she seemed to have regained her usual vigor. Since that was the case, let her play. It's been a long time since I've exercised my limbs. Since they've delivered themselves to my doorstep, I might as well use them as practice. Fengjiu took a step forward from his side, flexing his wrists. His gaze fell on the leaders of the group, and he said slowly, "It seems that the aristocratic families in this city don't have much of a reputation. If that's the case, I don't mind crippling a few of them." What arrogance! A family head's face darkened. Being provoked like this, he was furious. The spiritual energy in his body surged, and he immediately stepped forward. "I'd like to see what kind of ability you have." At this time, because Fengjiu and Xianyuan Mo's strength was restrained, they didn't know how strong they were. Until Fengjiu made a move. Crack. The sound of bones breaking resounded, shocking everyone who was watching. They all thought that the patriarch had sent her flying with a single palm strike, but they didn't expect that the woman in red would dodge to the side and grab the patriarch's wrist with one hand. At the same time, she twisted downwards, and the bones in his hand instantly broke. "Ah!" A painful cry mixed with disbelief rang out. The family head tried to withdraw his hand, but his knee was kicked heavily, and he immediately knelt down. Family head. Family head. Chapter 44-35. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw this scene. At this moment, no one dared to step forward. Fengjiu glanced at those people indifferently. With a wave of his hand, he crippled the cultivation of the family head who was kneeling in front of him. In an instant, a blood-curdling scream rang out, causing everyone to gasp in shock. "She, how dare she?" The elders of the other family stared at the woman in red in disbelief. She clearly did not look very powerful, but the combat power she displayed was so shocking. Even the family head's cultivation was crippled by her in an instant. This was too terrifying. When the leaders of the other clans saw this, they wanted to retreat. However, as soon as they moved, the indifferent voice rang out. "Do you think you can still escape unscathed?" The indifferent voice was filled with pressure, causing them to freeze in place. Their originally retreating steps also stopped. They wanted to retreat but did not dare to. It was a kind of pressure that reached straight to their souls. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. They only felt the air become oppressive, and even breathing became difficult. Under that pressure, their legs gave way, and they knelt down with a plop. "Ah! Ghost Doctor, please spare us." "Yes, we were blind. Ghost Doctor, please spare us." If it was said that they didn't believe the woman in red's identity as the Ghost Doctor, then at this moment, they didn't doubt it at all. Because, besides the legendary Ghost Doctor Feng Zhou, who would dare to be so arrogant and powerful? However, no matter how much they begged for mercy, the red-clothed woman just calmly looked at them. Her cold gaze caused them to not dare to look straight at her. However, to have them cripple their own cultivation to save their own lives, they could not bring themselves to do it. An elder who had rushed over after hearing the news arrived. When he saw Xianyuanmos and Fengzhou, his eyes narrowed. "Azure Dragon Sovereign, Ghost Doctor." He immediately stepped forward and bowed. Greetings, Azure Dragon Sovereign, Ghost Doctor." Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead, and his face turned pale. "And who are you?" Fengzhou glanced indifferently, and his gaze landed on the elder. Replying to the Ghost Doctor, This old man is a member of the Wu clan. Because I knew that my subordinates had caused trouble, I specially came to take a look. I didn't think that I would have offended the Ghost Doctor. I ask for your forgiveness." The old man hurriedly said, half bowing, not daring to stand up straight. Hearing this, Feng Zhou smirked. "If that's the case, then cripple their cultivations. I will not pursue this matter." Hearing this, the elder hurriedly replied, Yes. "Thank you, Ghost Doctor, for your mercy." He immediately turned to look at the leaders of the various families, and shouted, "Ghost Doctor, you blind idiots. Today, Ghost Doctor, you'd better get the hell over here." However, none of them dared to step forward. At this moment, they were all kneeling on the ground. They did not even have the strength to stand up. Their faces were ashen, and their lips trembled. They could not even beg for mercy. The old man grunted coldly when he saw this, and then his figure flashed and personally crippled the cultivations of the few people in the lead. When he turned around with the intention of apologizing to the Azure Dragon Sovereign and the Ghost Doctor, the two of them had already vanished without a trace. Chapter 44-36. A few days later, Xianyuanmos and Fengzhou finally arrived at the peak of Tianshan Mountain. When he came here again, it was still the same snow-white scenery. He walked slowly towards the place in his memory. He saw that on the mountain peak, the white-haired old man in white seemed to have merged into one with the world of ice and snow. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't be able to tell that there was a person sitting there. Xianyuanmos and Fengzhou stopped 1 meter in front of him. As he was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, they did not disturb him. They just stood there quietly and waited. Time passed little by little. A gentle breeze blew by and traces of coolness entered their bodies. After an unknown amount of time, fine snowflakes floated down from the mountain peak. The snowflakes were like goose feathers. Their heads and clothes were gradually stained with snow. However, the two of them continued to stand there. They didn't move or speak. They only looked at the sky filled with white snow. No one knew what they were thinking. The old man who was sitting with his back facing them did not seem to know that the two of them were sitting quietly behind him. After a long time, he sighed softly. I am an outsider. I can't help you with anything. You should leave. Hearing this, the two of them were slightly moved. Xianyuanmos did not speak. Instead, it was Fengzhou who asked, Senior, do you know why we are here? As the saying goes, one does not visit a temple without a cause. Although I am an outsider, I can see the big picture of the world clearly. I can vaguely guess the purpose of your trip. As he spoke, he stood up and gently brushed away the snowflakes on his body. He looked at the two people in front of him and asked, You've been standing here for so long, looking at this vast expanse of whiteness. What do you think? Fengzhou's gaze fell on his face. He said slowly, It is lonely at the top. Xianyuanmos still did not speak. He just looked at the snowflakes floating in the sky. Yes. It's lonely at the top. Right now, the two of you are the lords of heaven and earth. You are incomparably noble and have the strength to cover the sky with one hand. However, I want to ask the two of you, can the two of you stop the snow from falling? He stroked his beard and looked at the falling snow in the sky as he asked the two of them with a smile. Xianyuanmos and Fengzhou were silent. They lowered their eyes and watched as the snowflakes fell to the ground and melted with the snow on the ground. This is the heavenly Tao, the mandate of heaven. Even if your cultivation has reached the peak, there are many things that you can't change with your strength. Stroking his beard, he looked at the sky and said, There are 9 heavens, but we are not above the 9 heavens. No matter how strong you are, you cannot defy the heavens. Hearing his words, Xianyuanmos and Fengzhou's hearts skipped a beat. They were a little confused. Fengzhou paused for a moment. She didn't ask what he meant. She also did not ask about the purpose of this visit. She faintly felt that there was a deeper meaning to Tianjizi's words. However, she did not want to know at this time. Therefore, she opened her mouth and asked, Senior, has Emochan returned? Hearing this, Tianjizi smiled and said, He has returned. Is he well? Can we see him? Fengzhou asked. Tianjizi shook his head, The entanglement between him and the two of you is already over. There is no point in seeing him. Moreover, even if you want to see him now, you can't. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.